All right, everyone, get ready. We are diving deep into AI and medicine today, and
Yeah.
it's a big one.
It is exciting stuff.
It really is. So our listeners are really interested in how AI can actually analyze medical images. We're talking about convolutional neural networks. I think we should just call them CNNs.
Yes, CNNs, it's a mouthful,
It
right?
is a mouthful, and they sound intense. So before we get ahead of ourselves, can you tell us, like, what is a CNN?
Yeah, so, imagine you're trying to describe what a cat looks like to someone who's never seen a cat before. Like, how would you describe that?
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
Yeah.
I'd probably use specific features, right? Like it's got pointy ears or it's got whiskers or,
Toy.
soft fur,
Yeah.
things like that. So are we saying that these CNNs, are they kind of thinking like that, but instead of cats, it's like X-rays?
Exactly. Yeah, they're trained on mountains and mountains of data of these medical images. So we're talking about X-rays, MRIs, all different types.
Yeah.
And just how we learn to recognize a cat by its features, these CNNs, they learn to identify these really complex patterns.
Okay, so like picturing a cat face is CNN 101.
Mm.
What's the advanced course look like? How are they actually working?
You can kind of think about it like a really high-tech assembly line. So say we've got an X-ray, that's like our raw material, right?
Okay.
And each layer of the CNN, it's like a different station on this assembly line. So one layer might be looking for the edges in the image, another one for shapes, another one for textures. And as the image moves down the line, you're basically extracting more and more complex features, building up on the one before it.
Okay. I'm picturing this X-ray like going down a conveyor belt and it's getting more and more complex as it goes. And then what rolls off at the end?
At the end of our little production line, you have a decision. So is this a tumor? Is it a fracture? And that's the output. That's what the CNN is giving us.
But that sounds, I don't know, a little too easy. Like, what about the black box problem that we always hear about with AI? I mean, we're getting the what, but how do we know why it decided that?
You're totally right. And that's one of the really important things that researchers are working on right now. We're getting better at kind of understanding which parts of an image a CNN is focusing on, but the exact reasoning, the why, that's something that we're still trying to figure out.
It's like, we've got this brilliant student, but they can't quite explain how they aced the test. So how do we teach these CNNs to make these judgments in the first place? Is it like robot medical school?
Not exactly robot medical school, but it does involve a lot of learning.
Okay.
Think about how we learn to recognize things. We see a ton of examples. A CNN is very similar. It's trained on massive, massive amounts of data of these labeled medical images. So each image is like a flashcard. You've got the image, and then you've got the answer on the back. And the more images a CNN sees, the better it gets at recognizing those patterns and making connections.
It's like pattern recognition on a scale we can't even imagine. More data equals a smarter CNN. I don't know. It's impressive and a little scary, you know?
It is. That's why, getting these basics down is so important because we need to understand how powerful this technology can be, but also where the limitations are.
Okay, so we've got the basics of CNNs, but now I want to see them in action.
Let's do it. I think you found some really cool examples.
I found some amazing examples from cardiology to COVID diagnosis even.
Oh, wow.
It's really interesting stuff. So we're talking AI that can diagnose diseases just by looking at images.
Yeah.
It's wild. Where do we even begin with the applications?
It's really incredible, and it's all over, but I think one of the places where CNNs are really kind of excelling, is in cardiac MRI analysis.
Okay.
Because you look at those images, and they are so detailed.
Oh, yeah.
And even for a trained cardiologist to segment, to actually outline and be like, this is this and this is this, it's so hard.
It's like more than finding a needle in a haystack. It's your literal heart.
It takes so much experience and such a detail-oriented eye to get it right. And, CNNs are showing a lot of promise here.
Yeah.
They can really pinpoint the borders of the ventricles, identify valves, even highlight like these subtle abnormalities in the blood flow patterns.
And in the research I saw, it specifically mentioned how valuable this is, like when you're analyzing short axis scene MRI. So that's looking at the heart actually beating.
Wow.
And to think that, AI could be analyzing those images in real time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like faster, more accurate analysis. That's quicker diagnosis, more personalized treatments, better outcomes.
It's like giving doctors a superpower, but
Yeah.
it's not all about hearts, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this research even dove into AI and mental health, so we're talking ADHD.
Yeah.
I mean, that feels like a whole other level.
It's another area where researchers have started using CNNs to look at brain scans. So you've got patients with and without ADHD.
Right.
And they're training the CNN to see if it can find those patterns. And the results are, they're pretty impressive.
So wait, we're talking about an AI that could potentially be looking at a brain scan and seeing patterns that might indicate ADHD even before maybe symptoms are obvious?
Yeah, and with a really high level of accuracy. It's really interesting.
That's incredible. And you know what else is incredible?
What's that?
We were talking about COVID before, when the world went on lockdown.
Yeah.
CNNs were on the front lines.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, I mean, that research was using CNNs to analyze chest x-rays to look for signs of COVID.
Yeah, because they needed something to speed up the diagnoses, right?
Sure.
Especially when testing resources were hard to come by.
Oh, for sure. And that's something that's still being researched today.
Oh, yeah.
To see how AI can help us manage these outbreaks, potentially.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just COVID, right?
Right.
It's any lung disease, so pneumonia, lung cancer.
Yeah.
And yeah, the main thing is early detection.
It comes back to that standardized, accurate interpretation, right? Because
Yes.
two doctors could look at the same scan and maybe come to slightly different conclusions.
Right, totally, and that's what makes this so perfect for CNNs. Because you're right, it's subjective.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of time. Humans make mistakes.
sure.
And so this offers a more consistent, efficient, and I even say more objective approach.
It's like having a second set of eyes, but these eyes have seen millions of images and they never get tired.
Yeah, exactly.
But I want to pull back the curtain a little bit here
Okay.
on the tech. Like, I'm ready to get into what makes these things tick.
Okay, let's do it.
We've got to talk about convolutional layers.
Yeah, convolutional layers. So, these are like the detectives.
Well, and they're scanning every inch of an image, like looking for...
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, where's Waldo? But instead of Waldo, it's like, a specific detail.
That's a great way to put it because you've got all these filters, right?
Yeah.
And each one is trained to recognize something different in that image. So one might be for sharp edges, another one for curved lines or textures. And the more layers, the more complex these patterns get.
So each layer kind of builds this more detailed understanding of what's
Right.
going on in the image. Okay, that makes sense. But what about these pooling layers?
Yeah.
They sound like they're simplifying things, which seems counterintuitive. Like, we just went through all this detective work.
Right. So think about it this way. Say you're summarizing like a really long research paper. You're not going to copy the whole thing.
Oh.
You're going to pull out the key takeaways.
Right.
That's what pooling layers are doing.
Okay, so they're like, we got all this data.
Yes.
Let's distill it.
Yes. They're like the editors of the CNN world.
Gotcha.
They're like, let's trim the fat here. Let's make sure that we're focusing on what's important for this diagnosis.
Okay, so we've got our detectives, the convolutional layers, we've
Yeah.
got our editors, the pooling layers.
Yes.
How does this all play out in real life? Like, let's go back to those heart scans.
Yeah. So with the heart scans, those convolutional layers, those might be looking for the very specific shapes and patterns that we see in the blood vessels.
Oh, yeah.
And then those pooling layers, those are working to say, like, okay, we don't need this information over here. Let's hone in on this section.
It's amazing how they sift through all that data and know what's important.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
It's like finding, a tiny crack in a bridge that could be a problem down the line.
That's a great analogy. And that's why this is so exciting, because it's like this has the potential to change how we diagnose and treat disease.
It really does. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's really incredible to think that, this is happening now. This isn't sci-fi.
It's not sci-fi. This is real.
Yeah.
And it's only getting, more advanced.
It is really incredible. But I imagine, even with all this potential, there are still some challenges
Well, absolutely.
with this technology.
Yeah.
What are some limitations that we need to keep in mind?
Well, one of the things that comes up a lot is just the importance of having the right data to train these things on.
Okay.
So, like, if you've got a CNN that's primarily been trained on images from, one specific population, it might not be as accurate
Right.
when it's analyzing images from a different population.
So let me make sure I understand. Like, if you've got a CNN that's been mostly trained on medical images from, say, one particular part of the world,
Yeah.
and then it's used to analyze images from a totally different population,
Right.
it could miss something.
Yeah. It might miss some really crucial
I
details.
said it hasn't seen enough variation.
Exactly.
That's like learning a new language, and you've only ever heard one accent.
That's a good way to put it.
It's going to be harder to understand someone with a different accent.
Yeah, and that's why, people are working on this, but having those really diverse data sets
Right.
that really capture that full spectrum, that's super important.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, even with the best data, it seems like human expertise is never going to go out of style here.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely not.
Like, we don't want to just hand over all the decision-making to AI.
Right. These are tools.
Yeah.
They're very, very powerful tools. They're not meant to replace doctors.
Right.
The human experience, that judgment, the empathy, that is essential.
So we're talking about synergy then.
Yeah.
AI and human expertise working together.
Working together, and maybe even, the AI takes over some of those more tedious tasks, like analyzing all those images,
Yeah.
and it frees up the doctor to actually spend more time with the patient.
To be more human in
Yeah.
a way, because they're not, stuck behind a computer screen.
Right?
This could change how we think about healthcare.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just about, how we treat these diseases, but how we understand them, catch them early, even prevent them.
Right.
I mean, it's a really exciting time.
I know. From those first blurry x-rays to now AI that can spot things that, the human eye can't even see.
It's amazing how far we've come.
It's incredible. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. This deep dive has been so eye-opening, going from like the mysteries of, what even is a CNN to talking about the future of healthcare. It's really mind-blowing.
It has been a pleasure kind of diving into this world with you. And for everyone listening, we hope this has really kind of sparked your curiosity
Absolutely.
about all the amazing ways that AI is really changing medicine.
Keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Keep exploring. And until next time.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
This has been another deep dive.